here we are walking into Rivers Casino. It's literally like right next to O'Hare. Airplanes flying all over the place. You gotta like park in the garage and then walk over. Not really sure I get it. Oh my God, everybody, it's Brent Francis. There's a story behind that one. Let's see how we do. So Rivers Casino last night went pretty well. I ended up $951. Brent Francis that I was with ended up like $700 just playing Hold'em. And he's not exactly a guy that's going to stay up all night and play poker. So he was like, hey, everybody, it's 9 o'clock. We're in Chicago. He was going to go take a nap out in the car. And since we're in between Chicago and Detroit, I decided to reach out to my brother, and I said, hey, bro, don't you have a house somewhere in between Chicago and Detroit? And he's like, yeah, man, it's a lake house with a jacuzzi, the whole 9 yards. So, we decided to stop here in between Chicago and Detroit. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. I did misplay one hand that I didn't put in previous comments. I had, I can't remember. I didn't take the notes, but it was Ace King. I think it was like Deuce 4 with a suited spades. And gentleman to my right, who was in the under the gun, made it 15. I decided to 3-bet because I hadn't done too much 3-betting, and I just felt like juicing up the game a little bit. And I 3-bet to 50. We get total of 4 callers, and I'm basically under the gun +1. And flop comes Queen 10-5 with 2 diamonds and 1 spade. And it checks to me, and there are 2 people behind me, so I'm exactly in the middle of all the action. I decided to check. I could have done a C-bet because no one had been 3-betting that much. And so I decided to check, and the turn comes 7 of spades. And the initial person first to act decides to bet $300 into a $350 pot, and I go ahead and call, and the gentleman to my left calls. So we go 3 ways to the river. There's about $1,200 in the pot. I have a spade draw. I have a gut shot straight draw. I really don't think this guy's got anything, and the river comes a 5 of diamonds, but he's only got like 450 behind. So he checks. Everything in my body screamed, just throw out an orange chip and bet 1,000. And but the reason why I didn't, I literally went in the tank for a whole minute, and the guy only had 450 behind, and I thought even if he had like Queen Jack, Queen King, Ace Queen, I couldn't get him off the hand. So I check, and the guy behind me checks, and the guy who initially bet out 300 had a complete wrap, 6-8-9 Jack. So basically, he needed half the deck that wasn't a spade, and the guy behind me just had Ace Jack Queen. And he takes it down for Ace Queen, so I should have bet that out, but that was the only hand I really misplayed. Overall, the place was pretty good. The chairs are really nice. You can't call in. They do have a really weird dinner break rule. So if you go to Rivers Casino in Des Plaine, Illinois, which is literally right next to O'Hare, one of their dinner break rules, which is, I guess, okay for Hold'em players, but not so much for PLO players, because they typically get like 1-2-5 PLO going and then 1-1-2 PLO going. So if you take a dinner break, you got to go tell the floor, and if you're gone for more than 15 minutes, they pick up your chips, and then as long as you come back within 90 minutes, they put you back on the list, and you're first on the list. So in a PLO game, when there's only like 1 or 2 tables going, your wait can be pretty extensive. That's the feedback that I got, is that if you go on dinner and you take 90 minutes, even if you just take 40 minutes, you could be on the list for like 2 hours before a seat opens up. So overall, though, I definitely give Rivers Casino, I would say about 7 to 8 stars. The tables there were good. The dealers were very nice. The 5100 game mix, they have a horse 5100 game every Sunday and every Thursday. That was a pretty good game. And then the PLO is pretty good as well. So obviously, if you're in Chicago, it's not a bad place to stop. So
I sit down at the table. I bought in for 2,500 effective. So I was in the game for 2,500. And yeah, the first hand that I look at is deuce 4, 6, 6, double suited, both in clubs and spades. I am on the button, so obviously any hand on the button you can play. And so everybody limps. I did a $10 straddle. That is the other thing in PLO. When they straddle, you can straddle on the 2-5 game anywhere between $10 and $20. So if you do run up a chip stack and you've got $5,000 in front of you and somebody else has got $5,000, I can see starting to do a $20 straddle. Otherwise, it's pretty common that most people settle in the middle and go with 15, which was a little weird. But in any case, I had a $10 straddle. Everybody limps. I considered raising, but again, I'm brand new to the game, so I don't want to look too much like a maniac, so I go ahead and just check. So we go 5 ways to the flop, and the flop comes king 3-4 complete rainbow, and it checks around to me. So as you guys know, with the button principle, I go ahead and bet pot. I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to start off by betting pot. So I bet 50 bucks, and the small blind calls and everybody folds. And so the turn comes a 6. Now there's 2 hearts on the board. One's a 6 of hearts, and then I believe the 3 of hearts was on the board as well. And there's only 150 in the pot, and the small blind decides to take the driver's seat in this hand, and he decides to lead out for 120. Really weird line here, unless he's got deuce 5 or 5-7. It is a limped pot. I could definitely see that, but obviously when we turn second set, I'm not going anywhere, so I go ahead and call. The river comes out of jack, does not pair the board, so I'm a little disappointed in that. And he leads out for 150. Now, as you guys know, in my blocker bet video, when somebody doesn't do a full pot size bet on the river, they either have like complete air, they don't want you to call, or they have the stone cold nuts when they bet so low, because he's betting 150 essentially into a $400 pot. So I go ahead and call, and I say, I hope you have a set of 4s, and he turns over jack 6 for 2 pair, and we end up scooping that. The next hand that I'm going to go over, again, this is the button principle. You'll find out in a lot of these live plays that most of the significant hands that I play tend to be on the button. Either I put myself in a precarious position that I didn't need to because I believe in the button principle, or I just take it down. So 6-7, king, queen, 1 suit of spades. I straddle on the button, and a bunch of people limp. I end up making it 30. So we get 4 callers for 30. So there's 150 in the pot. And yeah, it seems like a pretty passive game so far. Like no one else is doing too much raising or 3-betting. And the flop is 8-9 king rainbow. So I flop top pair. I have an open-ended straight draw. Everybody checks to me. I just fire out $100 on the button. Again, button principle. And everybody mucks. So as you guys can see, the button principle is working full speed ahead. Now, the next hand I have, there's a $20 button straddle. I'm in the big blind. And so when there's a button straddle, the small blind acts first and then the big blind acts next. I've got king, 10-3 with clubs and spades. So I'm double suited, all black in my hand, baby. And I go ahead and I 3x the straddle, so I make it 60. We end up getting 3 callers. So we're going 4 ways to a flop for a $240 pot so far. And the flop is 10 jack 7 with 2 spades. Now I was the original raiser. The small blind checks. I go ahead and lead out for 125. I still have an overpair here. I've got blockers in case a 9 or a queen or an ace come up. And I have second nut spade draw, which is pretty good. I only get 1 caller. The caller that ends up calling me is a small blind. So I actually have position, even though I'm in the big blind. So I'm pretty pumped about that. Turn comes up, an offsuit 6. So 6, 7, 10 jack is what's on the board, and we're heads up. He checks, and I go ahead and check back. At this point, I've narrowed the field from 4 to 1 or 4 to 2. And at this point, I'm pretty content to see a river for nothing. Now, the river comes out, the ace of hearts, and even though this might not seem like a really good card for my hand, considering I was the pre-flop raiser, He hasn't shown any aggression whatsoever. He goes ahead and checks. Plus, I have blockers. So as you guys know from the blocker principle, if you have blockers and you're in position and everybody's checked to you, you should just bet pot. And that's what I do. I lead out for $490. He goes in the tank a little bit. When he did call, I thought there was a possibility he could have ace-high flush draws. So he might have rivered 2 pair. And for $490, he ends up folding. So with that, we scoop a pot just in position and with blockers. So that's pretty cool. The next hand I have ace king 5-7 with ace high hearts. And button straddles for 15. Since I'm first to act and I'm in the small blind, I hate being in first position, but I go ahead and raise it to 30 bucks. I have a suited ace, and I've got ace king for kickers, and a 5-7 for straight draw and all sorts of stuff. In any case, when I make it 30, we get 4 callers, so there's a total of 150 in the pot. And the flop is pretty much my gen flop, king 3-5 with 2 hearts. So I flop top 2 pair. I have the nut flush draw. There's nowhere I'm going in this pot. I go ahead and lead out for $75. Again, you want to mix in your bets when you flop monsters and when you flop weak hands that you're trying to eliminate people in the field, because if you flop a monster and you look weak, people will raise into you. In any case, I lead out for 75, standard continuation bet. Middle position, who happens to be a calling station, calls. Everyone else folds, and I'm pretty excited. I get so excited when this middle position player calls. He's been literally a calling station with top pair, ace kicker. Occasionally he'll have 2 pair, things of that nature. So at this point, I'm thinking he's got ace king, king queen. Maybe he's got queen high hearts. So I'm really hoping a heart peels off, because if he does, I'm really going to pound it into him and stack a lot of his chips. Turn is a 10 of diamonds. I still have 2 pair. There are now 2 diamonds on the board, and because of that, Andy's a calling station. I lead out for $225. And he snap calls, quickly calls, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I hope this guy doesn't have king 10, because if a king rolls off, he's gonna get a lot of my chips. I'm thinking, just put a heart out there. I've got so much equity. I'm okay with a king on the river, a 5 on the river, any heart, obviously, an ace. The river comes a 6 of diamonds. So backdoor diamonds get there. And I don't know. I felt like I should check. So even though I flop the world, I end up checking. He checks behind. I turn over king, ace, king, 5-7. I turn over my hand, and he turns over ace, king, 4-6. He didn't even have a heart draw. All he had was an open-ended straight draw. And he rivered the kings over 6s versus my kings over 5s. So we end up losing that one, but I'm perfectly okay with that, because him being a calling station, I know that if I get in a hand with him later on, I'll be able to take a lot of chips off of him. Next hand that I'm dealt that's significant is ace 4-4-5. I'm in the cutoff. There's a $15 straddle, and there's 4 limpers ahead of me. I decide to mix it up a little bit, and I limp. I normally don't like limping, but it is a little bit tighter here at Rivers, so I go ahead and limp. Now the flop comes jack 3-8 with 1 spade, and I do have ace 4-4-5 with the nut spade draw, and it checks around, checks to me. I go ahead and check, and the button ends up checking, and the turn is my absolute gen card, the deuce of spades. So here I have a complete wrap. Any ace, any 4, any 5, any 6 pretty much gives me the nuts. Any spade gives me the nuts. I'm feeling really good about this card. So 2 people check, and next thing you know, under the gun +1, or under the gun decides to bet out $75. It folds to me, and I actually consider raising, considering I've got position, I've got equity in this hand, but I decide just to flat. Again, the table's been a little nitty. I'm thinking that the person who bet out either now picked up spades, and I'm blocking nut spades, or he's got like 2 pair and he's just trying to take it down. But for $75, obviously I'm not going anywhere. Everybody folds, so we go heads up to the river, which comes the 6 of hearts. So now I have the stone cold nuts. There's $300 in the pot. He checks to me. I end up firing out $280. Again, I'm polarizing my hand, and he ends up mucking. So he does a good fold and mucks there. Now the next hand that I'm going over is pretty funny. I've got king, king, deuce 3 with no suits whatsoever. Now there's no straddle. So, it's 9-handed here at Rivers, and about 8 out of the 9 hands there's a straddle. So in this situation, there's no straddle whatsoever. I'm in the hijack. I end up raising for $15 just as a pot sweetener. And as people are calling, I'm like, okay, everybody, just so you know, I have a monster. I said, so that way, you know, when the flop comes out and I bet pot, you just have to assume I have top set. I say all of this, give a speech before the flop comes out, and it's so funny because the flop comes out King Jack 5 with 2 clubs. So definitely a very draw heavy board. All the wraps are there, 9, 10 queen, 10 queen ace. Somebody could have a set of jacks, the whole 9 yards, because it's 7 ways for 15 bucks. In any case, it checks to me. I go ahead and fire out a full pot size bet. I figured I've already given the speech. People aren't going to believe me when I give the speech, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. So I bet 105, folds around to the big blind, and the big blind decides to call, and the under the gun decides to call. So we're going 3 ways to the turn, and the turn is a 6 of hearts. So there's 2 clubs, 1 diamond, 1 heart out there, and I still have the stone cold nuts, super draw heavy board. Now there's obviously other straight draws out there. So the 2 players check to me, and I just continue to tell the story. So I bet 420, and the big blind player goes in the tank for a little bit, decides to fold. Next gentleman decides to call. After he calls, I ask him, how much do you have in your stack? Because I couldn't see his chips. He's got about 180 behind, maybe 160 behind, somewhere around there. And the river comes a red 4. So we do back into a 6 high straight with the deuce 3. So we flop the stone cold nuts and we end up with the straight. And he checks to me and I put them all in, or I bet effective to put them all in. And he goes in the tank and he decides to muck. He only had $180 left, so he couldn't call 180 into a $1,300 pot. My guess is he had nut clubs and probably it, and because he had no showdown value, so he ends up mucking it. And yeah, that's about it so far. So we're in between Chicago and Detroit right now. We're on this beautiful lake, and what's the name of this lake?
Long Lake.
We're on Long Lake, and yeah, what a great stop in between Chicago and Detroit. I might just have to do this for all my other trips. And but you know, that's about it so far. So hopefully we're gonna do good in MGM. And oh my God, everybody, look! It's Brent Francis. So if you do see him, come up to him and run up with him and say, "Oh my God, it's Brent Francis," and take a selfie. All right, everybody, play smart and run like a god.